The rain had stopped hours ago, but the driveway of the Whitmore estate still glistened under the dim lanterns lining the cobbled path, each one casting shadows that flickered like ghosts of memories Caleb Whitmore had tried to leave behind. The tires of his sleek black Aston Martin whispered against the wet stone as he pulled to a stop, the engine's purr fading into the kind of silence that didn't comfort. It haunted. As he stepped out, a gust of cold wind swept across the lawn, brushing against his tailored coat and curling around his neck like a phantom greeting. The mansion loomed ahead, all stone and iron and stained glass, a fortress meant to intimidate, but which now mirrored his emptiness with eerie precision. He hadn't seen its walls in 92 days, not since the morning he boarded a private jet, with nothing but a suitcase and a desire to escape the poisonous weight of betrayal. His father's death, his stepmother's veiled manipulations, the corporate vultures who smiled as they circled. He had needed space, distance, a retreat. And yet, after traveling across Europe, standing beneath foreign skies, drinking expensive wine that tasted like ash, all he had discovered was that grief was a loyal companion. It followed him everywhere. As he pushed open the front doors, their groan echoed through the cavernous entry hall, a sound so familiar it stabbed something inside him. The scent of lavender, soft and ghostly, lingered in the air, though the maids had been gone for weeks. He dropped his suitcase carelessly against the marble tiles and exhaled, shoulders heavy, heart heavier. His polished shoes clicked against the floor as he made his way upstairs, the chandeliers above casting fractured rainbows that felt wrong in a place so devoid of warmth. The house was too quiet, almost reverent, as if it knew its master had returned but didn't know whether to celebrate or mourn. Each step up the winding staircase brought him closer to the room he once found peace in, though peace now felt like a fable he could no longer believe in. At the top, he paused in front of the oak double doors of his bedroom, hand on the handle, pulse steady but eyes tired. He turned the knob. The door swung open, and time stopped. There, beneath the navy velvet duvet, nestled in a sliver of moonlight, lay a figure that didn't belong. A woman, asleep. Soft blonde strands spilled across his pillow like sunbeams frozen in silver. Her face, half hidden by the crook of her arm, was unmistakably hers. Sienna Brooks, his assistant, the woman who had stood beside him in boardrooms and storms alike, whose laughter once filled the office halls with fleeting joy, now laying there like a dream that crossed forbidden lines. She wore one of his old shirts, the one he never let go of, the one that still smelled faintly of wood smoke in autumn. His breath caught. Shock collided with fury. His chest tightened, not from anger alone, but from a strange, aching confusion he couldn't place. What was she doing here? Why this bed? Why that shirt? His jaw clenched, fists at his sides. But before he could demand answers, she stirred. Her lashes fluttered open, hazel eyes glazed with sleep, then widening in sudden realization. "Caleb, I thought you weren't coming back till next week." Her voice was soft, brittle with surprise. Silence crackled between them like thunder behind glass. For a moment, the world was reduced to the rhythmic thudding of his heart and the sound of his name on her lips. Familiar, tender, terrifying. Her expression shifted from confusion to fear to something that resembled regret. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Words tasted like betrayal now. She sat up slowly, hugging the sheets to her chest, vulnerability naked on her face. And in that single moment, as the clock ticked louder and the moonlight spilled secrets across the bed, Caleb realized something far more dangerous than betrayal had crept into his mansion. It was truth. Truth with bare feet and teary eyes. Truth wearing his shirt and lying in the space he once guarded with walls made of stone and silence. And whatever happened next would change everything. Sienna didn't move at first. She just sat there, wrapped in that thick, suffocating silence that said more than apologies ever could. Her trembling fingers clutching the edge of the velvet duvet like it could anchor her to this world unraveling before her eyes. Caleb stood frozen, eyes locked on her like she was both a stranger and someone he used to know too well. And when he finally spoke, his voice was a low thunder, not raised but rumbling with restrained fire. "Start talking." The command sliced through the room like a cold wind, and for a moment Sienna looked like she might shatter under the weight of it. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat, tangled in emotion, until finally, soft, cracked, almost childlike, she whispered, "Your stepmother fired everyone." The sentence dropped like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the atmosphere that seemed to hit Caleb straight in the chest. "I had nowhere to go," she added, eyes glistening, voice shaky but determined. "And you once told me, this mansion is your home too." That memory struck him like a betrayal from his own heart. Yes, he had said that, back when loyalty wasn't something he questioned, when Sienna was just his brilliant, ever-loyal assistant who knew how to finish his thoughts before he even voiced them. He clenched his jaw tighter, trying to keep his emotions under control, but they scratched at the surface like claws. She continued haltingly, as if afraid each word might condemn her further. "Vivian, your stepmother, she, she made sure I couldn't even get into the office. She called me a parasite, told me I was disposable. Then she let the rest of the staff go and changed the security codes. I had nowhere left to go, Caleb." His fists curled at his sides, knuckles pale, not just from rage but from disbelief. How could Vivian, that polished viper he'd grown to tolerate after his father's death, dare to touch the few people he trusted? He had left to breathe, to reset, to escape the scrutiny and boardroom politics clawing at his sanity. But while he was sipping vintage wine in a French villa and pretending solitude was a choice, his home had been turned into a war zone. Still, the question burned on his tongue like poison. Why his bed? Why that shirt? Why not reach out, explain, plead? She must have seen the doubt flicker in his expression, because her voice wavered into something more vulnerable. "I didn't plan this, I swear. I only needed one night. Just one night where I didn't feel abandoned." That word, abandoned, echoed in his chest like an old scar reopened. His mind warred with itself. Logic told him she could be playing him, manipulating the moment to gain back lost ground. But his gut, the one that always recognized sincerity like a bloodhound, whispered otherwise. Her eyes didn't lie. Not tonight. They weren't calculating. They were exhausted, wide and raw, laced with unshed tears and sleepless nights. And that old shirt? It wasn't seduction. It was memory, safety, a thread of comfort she thought she'd lost. He swallowed hard, still unable to look away. Something inside him shifted, not softened but stirred, a confusing blend of betrayal and empathy. She stood slowly, the duvet falling from her shoulders like petals, revealing not temptation but fragility. "I tried to leave," she said, "but something in me believed you'd understand." The storm outside began to growl again, wind beating against the glass panes like the sky itself was eavesdropping on their pain. He said nothing, but his silence was no longer rage. It was hesitation, that dangerous edge between belief and doubt, where one word could shatter the bond or save it. Minutes passed like hours, and neither of them moved. She didn't cry, not fully, but her eyes brimmed with it, and that unshed ache spoke louder than sobs ever could. The mansion, once cold and majestic, now felt alive with tension, its walls whispering of secrets, loyalty, and broken boundaries. Somewhere in the depths of the house, an old grandfather clock chimed, low and lonely. Caleb stepped back, not in retreat, but to breathe, to think, to process, because everything he knew had been flipped like a coin in the dark. He had returned home expecting silence and solitude, and instead found a woman in his bed, wrapped in his shirt, holding a truth he wasn't ready for. And though sleep never came for either of them that night, something else did. An uneasy truce, fragile as glass, sharp as memory and heavy as the silence that hung between them, like a chandelier about to fall. The days that followed were cloaked in silence and slow-burning tension. Caleb, a man of discipline and control, tried to resume normalcy by reinstating Sienna as his assistant, but nothing about her presence felt ordinary anymore. Every time she walked into the room, it felt like the oxygen shifted, thick with questions neither dared to ask. And though they exchanged polite words and scheduled meetings, They both moved like strangers, tiptoeing around the edge of a storm. Caleb caught himself noticing her too often. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. How she always paused before knocking on his study door. The shadows in her eyes that hadn't been there before. And while she did everything right professionally, emotionally, she had retreated behind a wall he couldn't breach. One restless evening, when the rain returned like a familiar ache, he wandered through the echoing halls of the mansion, drawn to the old wing his father once frequented, a part of the estate locked and layered in dust since the funeral. The scent of aged wood and forgotten memories pulled him toward the sealed-off basement, and with a rusted key he'd nearly discarded years ago, he cracked open a door that hadn't been touched in what felt like lifetimes. The air was stale, but beneath the scent of mildew and time, something called to him, a worn, leather-bound journal, resting on a collapsed bookshelf like a secret waiting to be confessed. His father's handwriting bled across the pages in hurried strokes, each line more unsettling than the last. Tales of Vivian's manipulation, her quiet conquest of shares, the toxic whispers she'd fed into his father's ear when Caleb was too young to notice betrayal wrapped in silk. There were accusations of financial sabotage, of loyalty twisted into leverage, and most disturbingly, implications that Vivian had planned a silent corporate coup the moment Caleb turned 30. Today, he realized with a jolt. But it wasn't the schemes or threats that stopped his heart. It was a single entry, scribbled with trembling hands, likely in the final weeks before his father's passing. If anything happens to me, trust Sienna. She reminds me of someone I once loved. That line punched through Caleb's soul like lightning through stained glass. It wasn't just trust, it was reverence. His father, a man whose faith had always been measured, had seen something sacred in her. Caleb clutched the journal like a lifeline, his hands trembling, eyes burning, the walls of the basement now spinning with revelation and doubt. How could he have doubted her? And yet, why had she kept so much hidden? Fueled by fury and desperation, he stormed into the West Wing, where Vivian resided, elegant as ever in her designer robe, sipping wine like a queen admiring her crumbling kingdom. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slammed the journal on the glass table, pages fanned out like evidence in a trial. Her expression didn't flinch, but her eyes darted. He noticed. "What is this?" he demanded. Vivian, ever the actress, tilted her head with mock concern. "You're digging up ghosts now?" she said, as if the contents were fiction, as if his father's fear had been a diary of delusions. But when he pressed harder, accusing her of orchestrating the staff firings, the manipulation, the calculated silence, she finally struck back, lips curling into a cold smile. "You think she's innocent?" Vivian purred, standing now, her voice venomous. "Did she ever tell you she was once engaged to Luke?" The name hit Caleb like a bullet. Luke, the former executive who'd nearly destroyed his company, the man caught trying to sell trade secrets to their rival conglomerate. His stomach twisted, his vision blurred, memories of that corporate betrayal flooding back like a wound ripped open. "Yes, that Luke," Vivian whispered, her voice dripping like poison in a well. "Your beloved assistant used to wear his ring." Caleb staggered back a step, mind reeling, blood roaring in his ears. Vivian didn't need to scream. Her quiet words had detonated something deeper than rage. Doubt, betrayal, heartbreak. The journal lay forgotten on the floor, pages flapping like broken wings, while Caleb's world tilted once again. His father had trusted Sienna with his dying breath, and yet, the man she once loved had tried to sell him out. The questions came fast and brutal. Had Sienna known? Had she helped? Was everything a game? Or was she, too, just another casualty of Luke's deception? The mansion's walls seemed to close in around him, the weight of trust and treachery pressing down like a collapsing roof. And in that moment, as Vivian turned away with a victorious smirk, Caleb wasn't sure what hurt more, the secrets he'd unearthed or the ones still buried in the eyes of the only woman who might hold the truth. Caleb's breath hitched as he stormed into the library, where the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated Sienna's focused face, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as if trying to create something beautiful out of chaos. His voice broke through the quiet like thunder. "Tell me about Luke." The words hung heavy in the air, charged with suspicion and hurt. Sienna's skin turned pale, and her eyes, usually so steady, flickered with a mixture of fear and regret. "It was years ago," she whispered, voice trembling like a fragile glass about to shatter. "Before I met you." Caleb's fists clenched at his sides, the rage inside him twisting into a painful knot of confusion. "Did you come here to ruin me? To plant yourself in my life like some poison I couldn't see coming?" His voice cracked, revealing a vulnerability he barely recognized in himself. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the polished floor, and without warning, her hand connected with his cheek. Not with anger, but with heartbreaking tenderness. The slap was gentle but spoke volumes, the echo of all the unspoken words between them. "I loved you, Caleb," she said, voice thick with tears and years of silent longing. "Long before you ever looked at me like I mattered." The room seemed to close in on them, the air heavy and suffocating, filled with the weight of their shared history and the chasms of mistrust that had grown in silence. Caleb's heart pounded, torn between anger and a desperate need to believe her. But the hurt was too deep, the scars too raw. He turned away, the ache in his chest an unbearable storm, and left without another word. Sienna stood frozen for a moment, tears slipping silently down her cheeks as she gathered her things, the quiet clicking of her footsteps filling the void Caleb left behind. That night the mansion felt colder, emptier, its grandeur overshadowed by the hollow absence of the woman who had once been its beating heart. When dawn crept over the horizon, it found Caleb alone in the vast estate, haunted by the silence Sienna left behind. On his desk lay a single note, penned in delicate handwriting that seemed to bleed pain into every word. "You never truly saw me, just like everyone else." The words cut deeper than any blade, unraveling the fabric of trust and leaving Caleb drowning in regret and questions that begged for answers he might never hear. As the sun rose, casting long shadows through the towering windows, Caleb realized the truth of her absence. Not betrayal, but a heartbreak born from being unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. The mansion, once a fortress of solitude, now felt like a prison built from his own doubts, and the empty rooms echoed with memories of a love almost lost to suspicion and silence. The mansion's cold emptiness matched the hollow ache Caleb carried inside him as days slipped into a week of silent despair. Meetings were ignored, phone calls left unanswered, the faces of board members and investors blurred into distant shadows, unable to penetrate the fog of his grief. His world, once vibrant and alive, now echoed with loneliness so deafening it almost drowned out the memories of Sienna's laughter, the warmth of her smile, and the gentle touch that had made his fortress feel like home. Then, like a flicker of light in the darkest night, a stormy evening shattered his solitude. He caught her face on the news, radiant and purposeful, a small feature showcasing a charity gala she had helped organize, the very dream she had whispered to him in moments of quiet hope. Without hesitation, Caleb threw himself into the rain, driving recklessly through red lights, the pounding storm mirroring the chaos within his heart as he chased the fragile light that might save him. The streets were slick with rain, the world a blurred mosaic of headlights and reflections, until finally he reached the modest community center where Sienna stood, completely absorbed in helping a little girl tie her shoelaces, her smile gentle and full of grace, a stark contrast to the sharp tension that had filled their last encounter. For a long moment, Caleb simply watched her from a distance, the realization blooming in his chest like a fragile flower breaking through the cold ground. Sienna was not just a woman who had disturbed his nights, but the peace his soul never knew it desperately needed. As if drawn by an invisible thread, Caleb stepped forward, rain soaking through his clothes, heart pounding with a blend of regret and hope, his voice breaking the quiet hum of the evening as he whispered, "I was wrong." Slowly, Sienna looked up, eyes glistening with tears that reflected the storm outside and the storm inside him, her voice barely a breath as she said, "You hurt me, Caleb." His hands reached for hers, trembling with the weight of his remorse, and he vowed silently to rebuild the bridges he had burned. "Let me fix it." Their embrace was tentative yet tender, a delicate dance of forgiveness and rediscovered trust that spoke volumes more than words ever could. And when their lips met, it was not a desperate fire, but a gentle promise. A kiss soaked in longing, healing, and the unspoken hope of a second chance. There was no scandal, no reckless passion, just two wounded souls finding solace in each other's arms. The rain washing away the pain of the past and nurturing the fragile seeds of love, reborn amidst the storm's relentless rhythm. The community center's soft light seemed to glow brighter that night, reflecting the warmth that bloomed quietly between them, a silent testament to the truth that sometimes love is not about grand gestures or fiery declarations, but about the quiet moments of understanding and the courage to say, I'm sorry, when the world feels like it's falling apart. Caleb's heart, once a fortress locked tight with distrust, now opened with a trembling vulnerability, while Sienna's guarded walls crumbled under the weight of genuine repentance and newfound hope. They stood there, drenched and vulnerable, wrapped in a tender embrace that whispered promises of healing in a future rebuilt on honesty, trust, and the kind of love that sees beyond mistakes to the person standing brave enough to try again. The storm outside began to soften, raindrops slowing to a gentle patter, as if nature itself was blessing this fragile reunion. Caleb realized that this moment, quiet and unassuming, was the true turning point, the beginning of a story neither of them had dared to hope for, but both desperately needed. In the silence that followed, they held on to each other tightly, hearts beating in sync, knowing that the journey ahead would not be easy, but that together they could weather any storm. Love, Caleb understood then, was not just a feeling but a choice, a daily act of courage, forgiveness, and faith in the unseen bond that tied two souls together. And in that rainy night's embrace, beneath the gray skies and flickering streetlights, two hearts found their way back home. Just when the fragile calm between Caleb and Sienna began to settle like the aftermath of a storm, a shadow from the past emerged to threaten the delicate peace they had found. Luke, the ghost that haunted their broken trust, returned unexpectedly, his presence like a cold wind that chilled the very air of Caleb's sleek office. He walked in with a forced smile and venomous intentions, claiming that Sienna owed him money, a lie thinly veiled as a demand. But the truth ran far deeper and darker. It wasn't about debts or dollars. It was about revenge, a cruel game set in motion by Vivian, Caleb's stepmother, who had orchestrated every move to dismantle Caleb's life piece by piece. Luke had been paid handsomely to worm his way back into Sienna's life, to reopen old wounds and shatter the fragile foundation Caleb was desperately trying to rebuild. But this time, Caleb's heart, battered and bruised, refused to be a pawn in their twisted game. With the quiet determination of a man who had suffered enough betrayal, Caleb devised a plan not just to protect Sienna, but to end Vivian's reign of manipulation once and for all. He set a trap, using every resource at his disposal to secretly record a conversation between Vivian and Luke, proof that would unravel their deceit like threads pulled from a tapestry. The next day, with the weight of truth in his hands, Caleb summoned the entire board to witness the unmasking of Vivian's treachery. The room fell into stunned silence as the damning evidence played out, revealing Vivian's calculated schemes to poison Caleb's life and legacy. The cold veneer of her power cracked, and her empire of lies crumbled in disgrace. But Caleb, despite the betrayal that had threatened to consume him, chose mercy over vengeance. He fired Vivian from the company, stripping her of the power she so ruthlessly abused. But instead of dragging her through public humiliation, he offered her silence, a fragile peace preserved out of respect for his father's memory and the man he once was. You took everything, Caleb said with quiet strength, but you will never take my peace. As the dust settled and Vivian's shadow faded, Sienna looked at Caleb with new eyes. This was not just a man of wealth and power. This was a man with a golden heart, a soul forged in fire and tempered by compassion. In that moment, she saw beyond the mansion's cold walls and the million-dollar facade to the fierce protector who fought not just for his company, but for the woman who had captured his heart. Their bond, tested by lies and pain, grew stronger, anchored in the truth that even in the darkest moments, love could be the light that guides you home. And so, with the past confronted and the future uncertain but hopeful, Caleb and Sienna stood together, ready to face whatever storms might come, united by trust, courage, and the quiet power of forgiveness. Months had passed since the storm had passed, and the dust of betrayal had finally settled, and with those months came a transformation, not just of the mansion, but of Caleb Whitmore himself. The sprawling Virginia estate, once a silent fortress filled with cold shadows and painful memories, now breathed with life and warmth. Golden light spilled from every window, illuminating the polished floors and rich mahogany walls, while the sound of laughter and music filled the air, a vibrant contrast to the oppressive silence that had once reigned. It was as if the mansion had finally been thawed by the presence of something it had long been missing, a genuine love, fragile but fierce, that had taken root in the hearts of its two most unlikely inhabitants. Caleb found himself standing in the very bedroom where he had once confronted Sienna with accusations born of fear and doubt. Yet now, in this same space, he was preparing to ask the most important question of his life. His hands trembled, not with anger or suspicion, but with hope and vulnerability, as he knelt before the woman who had been his assistant, his confidant, and the light that had pierced through the darkest corners of his soul. "I was a lonely man in a castle built from ice," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "But you melted every wall I built." The tears in Sienna's eyes mirrored his own as she smiled through them, whispering, "And you made me feel seen." Those words held the weight of every unspoken promise, every shared secret, every moment of pain and healing they had endured together. Their journey had been anything but easy, marked by betrayal, heartbreak, and silence that screamed louder than words. But here, in this sacred space, those hardships were transformed into something beautiful, a testament to the resilience of love. Their wedding was held beneath a canopy of blooming roses in the garden of the mansion, where sunlight filtered gently through the petals, casting a soft glow over the gathering of friends, family, and those who had witnessed their story unfold. As Sienna walked down the aisle, every guest rose, not because she was flawless or perfect, but because she was real. Real in her courage to love a man scarred by his past. Real in her strength to forgive and to hope. Real in the way she embodied love itself, fierce and tender all at once. Caleb's heart swelled with pride and gratitude as he watched her approach. The woman who had once stumbled into his life, quite literally, and stayed long after the walls came down. When they exchanged vows, their words were not grand or overly rehearsed. Instead, they spoke with the raw honesty that had carried them through storms. Caleb promised to protect her heart with the same fierce devotion that had kept him fighting for her truth. Sienna vowed to stand by his side, not just as his wife, but as his equal and partner in all things. In that moment, under the endless sky and surrounded by the scent of roses, they were not the millionaire and his assistant, the betrayed and the accused. They were simply two souls who had found home in each other. The mansion, with its towering walls and vast rooms, no longer felt like a cold prison, but a sanctuary filled with memories of pain overcome and love embraced. Caleb realized then that he had never truly been alone. The mansion had never been his home, not in the way he needed one to be. True home was not built with bricks or guarded by gates. It was found in the arms of the woman who had once accidentally slept in his bed and who had now permanently taken his heart. Their future stretched out before them like a path lined with roses, some petals soft and fragrant, others sharp and thorned. But no matter what trials lay ahead, Caleb and Sienna were ready to walk it together. Their story, woven with threads of heartbreak, betrayal, forgiveness, and love, was a reminder that even the coldest castles could be warmed and the loneliest hearts could be healed. And as the sun set behind the mansion, casting a golden glow over the newlyweds, it was clear that this was just the beginning of a lifetime of shared dreams, whispered promises, and endless love.